Welcome everybody to another episode of Tech Talk Tuesday. I'm Dan Conger. I'm Baseline's training manager, and with me today on that side of the other side of the screen, Tracy Shields. Tracy, what do you do with Baseline?
I'm a regional sales manager for the Mountain States and Pacific Northwest.
Awesome, fantastic. Hey, thanks for joining me. It's good. I always appreciate working with you. And what's cool too is you got a pretty diverse region that you cover. So you have some good experiences, out of your home base there in Colorado. But as you get to some of the other mountain areas, it's different in different environments, and people use products differently.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
pretty diverse.
So today, in the idea of sticking with training or things that people might put their hands on and do things with, we wanted to talk about baseline data in the field. That's our official title of it today. And this is where I wanted to take that is the data that we get from sensors. We've talked about this before, can be used for better management, and better irrigation decisions. You can also use it to automate those decisions. But what we wanted to talk about today is how that data can help people in the field look for issues. That's essentially troubleshooting, but then maybe fine tune their irrigation system. So that's kind of where we wanted to take it today. So for that, I've got my controller right here in front of me. So a lot of this I want to show you at the controller. I kind of really thought about doing this through Base Manager, but I'm like, well, if you're in the field, chances are what you got your phone, your box of tools, and the controller. So let's use that as our primary. So here's my controller. Hey, look at that. Okay, that actually it worked. It did what I wanted it to do. That's great. So I wanted it. One of the simplest things, and one of the most important things, is testing devices. So let's test some zones. So I'm going to do that at the self-test position. That's as we come around the dial here. Got a little bit of a shadow, but we can see it. And I'm just going to test a single two-wire device because I have some very specific devices on my system. And Tracy, what I've done is I've mocked up a very simple system here in my office, and I've got everything is live. I've got maybe 15, 20 zones. I've got a flow sensor, an event bicoder. I've got it, and some soil moisture sensors, and we'll kind of test some of those. So the first thing I'm going to do is test a single two-wire device. So let's open that up. I've got the list of devices, and let's scroll through that so we can find. I wanted to test actually zone 2. Let's just come back. I'm going to highlight zone 2 and then press enter and test it. Can you see that okay, or do you want me to zoom in just a little bit more? I see you squinting a little bit.
It looks good to me.
Okay, got it. Okay, so I'm going to test zone 2. So this is some information we got. We got the valve current, we got valve voltage, and we got the two-wire drop. So this is telling us about two things. This is telling us about the state of my two-wire path and the state of my solenoids. So valve current. Well, what's valve current? What do you take from that, Tracy?
Your valve current is going to vary by manufacturer. So whether
Yeah.
depending on what type of or brand of solenoid you're actually trying to actuate, that number will vary.
Right. Because I've not seen. I'm used from my conventional field days of testing resistance on it. So this is the other side of that coin, right? We've got the resistance or the amperage draw. So something I remember that I figured out was that Rainbird commercial solenoids draw different than the Rainbird light or non-commercial or even their homeowner solenoids. Completely different draw. So yeah, absolutely, that's going to draw differently. And if we have really high draw, that's telling us something's going on with the solenoid. The voltage, well, my valve was getting 29.5, almost 30 volts. And my two-wire drop, because I have such a little tiny system, I had 0.6 volts of two-wire drop over my entire system. That's infinitesimally small. We were just talking about this amongst the RSMs, and when you start getting a higher voltage drop, maybe that's a problem, but you also see other issues. So what has some of the other RSMs seen when they get a really high voltage drop, a two-wire drop?
You could see things like flow meters not reporting data back across the two-wire path accurately.
Yeah.
Some of the reporting features, just some goofy things start to go.
Yeah.
Get your voltage drop up too high, you've got issues on that communication path.
So the voltage is about things either not getting enough voltage to work properly, but it's also symptomatic or can show that we might have communication issues. So we've seen, and we don't really do a hard and fast number on this, but when we start getting close to 3 volts of 2-wire drop, you're probably having other communication issues. Well, if you got bad wire path problems, that's going to indicate it. Now this tells me about the 2-wire path all the way out to that one. So let's test another one. I want to test zone 6. So we're going to scroll down through my list to number 6. There it is. Go the right way. So let's test number 6, and let's test that one and see what we come up with. So this one said valve current of 0, valve voltage of 0, and a 2-wire drop of 0.8. Oh, because I have a short circuit valve. Okay, that's great data to have to know that I have a solenoid issue. This is not, didn't say anything about the 2-wire. This said that my solenoid has an issue. Fantastic. I got 2 more I wanted to test. Let's go to zone 14 on my list. Go to 14 and test that one. Okay, so valve current of 0.68, valve voltage of 24 volts, and a 2-wire drop of 0. A 2-wire drop of 0, that's kind of interesting. Let's hang on to that one because remember that one. And then one more I wanted to test. Let's test 17. Let's see. There it is. 17 and test 17. 17, I have a 2-wire drop of 0, but I have an open circuit valve. Okay, so I'm going to resurface on that one and want to talk about what's going on. So you noticed, well, first one of those, we had a 2-wire drop of 0. What's going on with that one? So here we got a bicoder. And so what we're talking about, this is the 2-wire side. This connects onto the 2-wire path, and this is solenoid side. So open circuit solenoid, short circuit solenoids. That's all on this side of the problem, right? So what do you think might cause an open circuit solenoid? Any ideas, Tracy?
Could be a bad solenoid.
So the solenoid could be bad. Yeah, it could be that there's actually no solenoid on here, right? So if I had these two connected to a solenoid and this is in there and it's just hanging out there, well, we got some problems if that's the case. But it could be that we don't actually have the wire. That's true. Okay, on the 2-wire side, so that 2-wire voltage drop, we had the voltage drop, but I don't know if anybody caught this. Is really subtle. You might catch it if you watch the videos. You might go back and rewind it 30, 60 seconds, and notice that we had a VA0001 and a VA0002. Well, the 2-wire path on this one is as long as these white prongs. The 2-wire path's like infinitesimally short. It's really is non-existent. So 2-wire drop's going to be almost nothing. Where this guy has a 2-wire drop that's going to be, could be, like you said, thousands of feet long. That second valve that had the open circuit, did you catch that was a VA00 something, VA005? It was 5. I put them in different orders. Yeah. Why do you think that was open? Kind of a trick one.
Yeah, maybe didn't have the wire landed on the.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I had solenoids and wires connected to these first couple ones, but that other one that I didn't have a wire connected to it. So kind of keep in mind that, like, this is 212 zone bicoders, right? This is a 2-zone bicoder. This is 2 12-zone bicoders. Well, same thing. If I don't have wires connected onto here, and they check them, and it's looking for the wire, the solenoid, and the common. So how do you stop that from happening? Any ideas on a conventional wire?
You can go in and disable that zone.
You just unassign that zone, right? Then it won't ever check it again. Right, done. That's super. That's a really easy one. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Oh, I have a flow meter I wanted to check. So let's come back into my screen again. And this time I'm going to scroll a little bit lower, and let's find my flow meter. Oops. And I only have one flow meter. So there's flow meter 1, and I'm going to press that to test it. So flow meter 1, it gives me the serial number of flow meter 1. It tells me the flow is 15.7 GPM right now. It tells me it's used about 814 gallons, and 2-wire drop is non-issue. So 15 gallons a minute. Let's resurface again. Turn the dial back to run and check something out. My master valve isn't open. How do I have water going through my flow meter? What would be a good what's good to check if we've got water going through the flow meter, but the master valve's closed? Well, maybe the master valve's not. Yeah, I don't know.
Some sort of a break.
Yeah, it's probably a break, or it's probably a mainline break. It could be that the master valve isn't set up right. Probably something you want to look at. Now, if the master valve was open, and we also actually let's look at that one more time. So 2 things are going on here. The master valve isn't open, and I don't have any zones running. So it could be just some unscheduled flow. Someone's bleeding a valve or something like that. Okay, so flow, right? So we can test all of this right from the controller. Let's test pressure. Let's test a single 2-wire device, and let's take the shortcut, come in the back way. Pressure gauge 1, and my pressure sensor is reading 56.8, 56.79 PSI right now. Okay, good information to have about not only the wire and the device, but about the pressure in your system. Ooh, let's test some moisture sensors. So let's come up to moisture sensor 1 and test moisture sensor 1. Moisture sensor 1, current moisture is 28.8%. Soil temperature 75.9, and 2-wire drop is 0.9. So current moisture is 28.8. Why? Any ideas on 28.8? That's a number. What can you tell us about that, Tracy?
You're getting pretty close to field capacity potentially. You've got good moisture content in your soil profile, and
yeah,
turf should be happy.
So if I put a sensor in a bucket of water, does it read 100%?
It doesn't. No, it's a percentage of what the soil can actually hold in the face of gravity.
Right. So it's what, maybe 30, 35%, somewhere around in there. I think I haven't tested it recently, but that's about where it is. So it's pretty close to saturation and very, depending upon the soil type, probably field capacity. So we'll kind of talk about some fine tuning irrigation later on, but this could be really wet. Now, does that jive with what you're seeing? I don't know, right? So this is some field diagnosis things that you can do. If you look out and you see that the turf is looking really wet, or pardon me, if the turf looks really dry and the sensor says it's wet, we got something going on here, right? One other sensor we can test, and let's do that one. So let's do moisture sensor 2. And test moisture sensor 2. Let's see what we come up with this one. So moisture sensor 2, moisture is at 30%, so this one's really wet too. Soil temperature is 41.7 degrees and a 2-wire drop of 1.2 volts. So this one, we've got some pretty cool soil. Well, the 41 degrees, yeah. What's your soil temp? What's your soil temp right now in Denver area?
We're probably up in the 70s, 80s, I would guess.
Oh, really? That warm? Wow.
We're still pretty warm. We're cooling down at night, but those cold temps aren't getting into the soil quite yet.
Yeah, it takes a while to really make its way into the soil. Now, since I'm mocking this up in my office, I've got a little glass dish with some ice cubes on it. So of course I'm cheating. I want to demonstrate all this stuff, right?
Okay, so we talked a little bit, Dan, about that soil temp when it's that low. In my territory, there's a lot of bluegrass, and so bluegrass doesn't actually come out of dormancy until 54 degrees in the soil. So unless you're irrigating athletic fields to soften them for playability, there's no reason to irrigate your bluegrass turf below 54 degrees soil temp.
The other thing that I've thought about soil temp that if and it we so often kind of lean towards the irrigation side, and you just brought up a horticultural practice, and so on the horticultural side is pre-emergent, right? So weed seeds will germinate above a certain temperature, and I forget what it is. There's X degrees that for me it's crabgrass. Right? Got to get a crabgrass protectant down, a pre-emergent, but if you get it down too soon, it's going to be wasted. If you get it down too late, sorry, you missed your opportunity. So if you know that your soil temperature is still cool, you've got a little bit of time to schedule to put that down. Or fertilizer. Fertilizer when it's cold, right? It's going to just sit there and it may be wasted. So knowing your soil temperature makes a big difference.
Yeah, we do a lot of winter watering here, Dan, on trees and shrubs because they're so arid and we don't get a lot of snow in the Denver market. So it's a good place to see soil temp and moisture content in the winter to know, one, is the soil frozen? Am I going to put down water that's just rejected? It's not going to move through the soil. So is the soil warm enough to take the water, and do I need to winter water?
So I think you've talked about that. Your irrigation might not be running, but you're leaving your controllers on so you can still monitor soil temp and moisture.
Bring water trucks out. So your irrigation is blown out, winterized. There's only air in the line, right? So now you've got to bring a water truck out to irrigate trees and shrubs in the winter.
It's got to be expensive to run a water truck.
Mountain State's problem.
Yeah, but if you don't have to run the truck because the moisture content's up, well, like that's money in your pocket, especially if you're a contractor. Yep. So yeah, dig it. Let's take a look at. I'm going to bring over my screen because I wanted to jump in and dive a little bit deeper on the soil moisture sensor. So I'm going to log into my controller here that's here in the office, and we'll do that via Base Manager. So on this one, I've got a couple of different controllers set up. So give me a moment to log in and find my right one. This is my Practice 3200. Okay, so we could do all the same testing through Base Manager, right? I figured I wanted to show you what it's like out in the field, but coming back to moisture sensor, and I'm going to run a chart on moisture sensor 1. And let's graph this. Now, I didn't have a whole long period of time. I should have set this up longer, and let's see, I can zoom in, so I can make this a little bigger. It would be great if I would have had a little bit more time on this one, but I think we can get the idea here. So what's kind of interesting on this one is this green line is showing moisture content, and over the last 3 days, the moisture content essentially has not changed. Now there's a little farts or variations, but it's been hovering at 29%, 29.1, right? So it's just kind of varied. Probably, maybe I splashed it around a little bit because that's just sitting in essentially a bucket of water. So, but it's not fully immersed. So it was always and then this is the air temperature in my office. You can see it it's kind of warm right here. It only got as cool as 72 degrees last night, and looks like it was about 81 degrees was the high in my office. So if we saw a moisture sensor that was running completely flat and wasn't changing moisture content, what does that tell you?
The first thing I would check would be my schedule to see, how often am I irrigating and am I allowing the soil to dry down between irrigation cycles?
Ooh, yeah, right. Because we want to see that more traditional graph of the run times spiking and then moisture content following it, and then dries down over a period of days. Absolutely, that would be a good one, right? The other one I always, because this is my personal experience, is the depth of the moisture sensor, right? So we have some heavy clay soils in some of the areas that I work in, and a sensor that's buried 2 foot deep in a clay soil, it's not changing moisture content very much. The weather hardly impacts it. So it's going to stay really constant. So, this is perfect timing because I've just put out 3 videos on troubleshooting soil moisture sensors. I got another 3 that'll come out probably next week, maybe late this week, and about troubleshooting moisture sensors and sensors that don't read temp, or you suspect they don't read temp or don't read moisture, or things like that. So that's definitely got them on the website and on YouTube. Awesome. Um, so since we're the next question, the next thing I wanted to talk with you about was how could we use some of these things, and this is more thoughts, how could we use some of these sensors and some of the sensor data to make better management decisions? So the sensors I want to take a look at are soil moisture sensors, soil temperature, pressure, flow, and maybe the precip sensor. So tell me some of your thoughts on how you might use those. You mentioned the one on temperature and are you going to roll a truck or not?
Mm-hmm.
Any other ideas?
Yeah, something that I see fairly commonly in my territory is hydrophobic soils. So we may have a moisture sensor that's buried at the appropriate depth, but maybe the irrigation cycle over the top is not penetrating the soil, and the soil is repelling that water. And so we may need to change our cycle and soak strategy based on the information we're gathering. So with the use of a little bit of discovery in the field and finding out right after that irrigation cycle, where is my water at? Is it sitting and pooling on the surface? Is it percolating down? Am I actually getting, I've found situations where the irrigation cycle is never touching the moisture sensor that's only buried 2.5 inches to the top of the blade.
Mm-hmm.
Change strategies with the frequency and the duration of the soak cycles and to get water to move through the soil.
So interesting concept. You didn't once say that we were using the soil moisture sensor to automate those decisions. You could just be using that soil moisture sensor to collect data and be a better water manager.
Yeah.
Which I kind of run into that in my training classes where people are like, no, I don't want anything to do with soil moisture sensor. It's like, okay, that's cool. But this is information. And the more information you have, the better you're going to be as a water manager and the more efficient your system's going to be. So I think the idea of having a sensor to collect data is a fantastic thing. How about pressure? How can we use pressure to better manage a system or just get the data from a pressure sensor to do it? Again, not necessarily maybe automating, but maybe just collecting data. I don't know.
I think the use case that's closest to mind for me is a customer in Utah that has slow closing valves. And so he was having distribution uniformity problems because valves were hanging on hydraulically for well over 5 minutes into the next runtime. And so now he's put pressure sensors on his main line, and he pauses irrigation when he drops to a certain threshold of pressure and then resumes the schedule when the pressure comes back up. So we've balanced out all of that distribution uniformity problem we had across the parks by balancing how those valves played with each other.
So on one end of the spectrum, you could use it to collect data and see that I have these big pressure drops and it correlates with my runtime. You could do a lot of detective work on it, or we could automate it. And as you said, we created a pause based when the pressure drops below a certain set level, probably depending upon the type of system that he's operating, right? If a spray head needs closer to 30 and a rotor might need 50 to 90 PSI, depending on what they're using. Yeah, it's good. And then of course, flow, right? We could use flow and no one wants to try and manage flow on their own. Just having the flow data, that would be nuts to try and do it. We want to turn that over to the system and let it automate based on flow. So yeah, that would be huge. I mean, although I did have flow running and I didn't have my master valve open and I didn't have zones running, that's some detective work boots on the ground could do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's a question that Greg put up in the chat. He says, going back to the master valve and flow sensor, please describe the layout of a water source master valve flow sensor. If the master valve is installed at the water source and the master valve is closed, how is the flow sensor seeing flow? Greg? Okay, so something I learned as a trainer, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. I don't know. I don't know how that's possible.
Flow sensor's upstream from it, Greg.
So that's a really weird place to put it, though, Tracy, trying to cover for me. No, Greg called me on it. He called my BS on that one. No, it can't happen, right? Now, what I shouldn't have pointed out the master valve was closed. I should have just pointed out that no zones were running and you wouldn't have even noticed that.
Yeah.
So if the master, let's say you had a normally open master valve. Ooh, yeah, that's it. That's what it is. Liar. If you had a normally open master valve but you had no zones running, that would be unscheduled flow. And actually what happened initially was my controller triggered that message and I cleared it off because I wanted to show you it clean. But it could be, to your point, it actually can't do that, Greg. And I run into that in class sometimes too when I have a normally open, normally closed master valve. And they're like, it can't happen because the main line isn't charged. I'm like, okay, that's true. Or, oh, here's one, Greg. Maybe someone manually opened the master valve. Oh,
And they're running a coupler.
Yeah, that's a possibility too. Nice. Okay, good. Nice catch. It's good to see you're on your game. I appreciate that one. How about a precip sensor? That's another sensor input. How can we use we didn't get a chance to really to test that today, but how can we use a precip sensor to fine tune our irrigation and our irrigation management?
Yeah, so I recommend people use their precip sensors as a way to react to live rainfall. So we get a lot of passing thunderstorms in the summertime here, and sometimes they're enough to replace an irrigation cycle, but a lot of times they're not. But when you irrigate in the rain, you get phone calls. So it's the phone call reducer. And I've had people set their precip sensors to pause irrigation schedules at 1/10 of an inch and pause for 30 minutes.
That's like trace amount of rain, right?
Yeah, at the end of 30 minutes, if they didn't receive any more rain, the schedule resumes right where it left off, or it could set to another pause based on an amount of rainfall and then a stop point. Maybe you get 1/4 of an inch and then all irrigation just stops because at 1/4 of an inch of rain, we've likely replaced our irrigation cycle.
And it gives you, and then so when it stops, it won't start until the next start opportunity comes back around. And it might be the next day, it might be several days, gives you an opportunity to go in there, intervene and change the programming. Where that 30-minute, man, that's just reacting. Man, you could be doing 14, well, it could be in the middle of the night or what it should be, but maybe not. I like that concept. And then you could also later on review that data and just review the data and see when you get your rainfall. Like, let's say I moved into your market. I know when my rain happens. I don't know when your rain happens. That would be a lot for me to kind of learn. And I could do this. I could look at some of the records and say, your rainfall falls in this month, and it usually, it doesn't. These are the driest months, or we get these small amounts. So
we could also pair it with a soil moisture sensor and see effective rainfall.
Yeah.
So we get the inches per hour, how fast and quickly did it rain, and how well did our soil take that rain in.
So I guess my thing that I started with today is I want to encourage you, if you're just in the field or if that's really your primary focus, take advantage of the data from your testing. You can do it right at the controller. You could do some testing through your phone, which I didn't show. That's actually, I kind of like that one too. And then you could go into full base manager and do some more in-depth testing, maybe do some graphing, do some reporting. And then that's just like that first level of it. But then you could use this data, or please use this data, let me rephrase that. Please use this data to then make better management decisions and ultimately automate those decisions. And I think you'll be much better off as a water manager and as a technician. So. Like you said, we're out of time. We burned up our 30 minutes really quick again, Tracy. So,
yeah.
All right. Hey, well, thanks for joining me. I appreciate your time and appreciate all you for joining us on Tech Talk Tuesday. We'll see you back next time. I think Chris and Andy are up the next time. So thank you all. Good to spend some time with you. Have a great week. Have a good rest of the irrigation system. Take care.
See y'all.
Bye.